Check, check, check. There we go. Hey, what's up, everyone? Sorry, we had to switch over to YouTube only, and we'll probably just be sticking with YouTube. Kind of seems like a better platform for what we're doing. Instagram's giving us trouble, but I hope you're all doing well. And I'm excited about today. I'm going to get right into this leadership lesson, leadership breakthrough message. Hopefully, today this does something for you, helps you in wherever you're at, whatever you're walking through. My hope and my prayer is that God will do something massive through this today in your life, and you can share this with somebody else. We'll leave this up, and it will hopefully be something that God can use to transform your leadership and what you're going through and dealing with as a leader in any realm. We're hoping to empower leaders. That's a mandate that we have in Fearless, is to raise up the next generation leaders, not to just delegate tasks or jobs, but to delegate authority. And God has delegated you authority in your realm, in your sphere, whether it be in the church or it's outside of the church. God has something huge for you. I see a lot of people joining. Super HD, I dig it. Come on, there you go. Maybe 2 HD. You can see all my wrinkles. And man, we're excited. I'm actually in my house right now, in my room. And this is my room where I study, make all the videos for Fearless. We're right here, right now. Good to see you all joining. Let me expand your chat a little bit so I can see you. There we go. I can see Ben in here, Josh, Sway, seeing y'all, Chris List. Love the setup. I love you, Sway. You're the best, man. Let's go. Let's dive into this with the ones that are here, and I'm sure a lot more will watch this later. This message, I'm taking us to one of the hills. So we've been talking about the hills and valleys, and we've been dealing with a lot of valleys that we walk through as people. We're amongst a lot of valleys, but the hills that God takes us on, the mountaintops, can test us just as much as the valleys. And so sometimes fear has come when I'm in the valley, and sometimes fear has come when God takes me to a mountaintop. In other words, the mountaintop is the place where the purpose, the destiny, it's where everything finally lines up. Some of us have struggled at times to break through that fear that comes from the mountaintops. And I want to talk about a mountaintop today. We've been talking about a lot of valleys this week in church. We talked about the valley where David fought Goliath. The week before, we talked about the valley of the poplar trees, where David goes into battle and he wins the battle, and then he asks God. The enemy comes back. He asks God, "Should I go again?" and then God sends them around a different route. So we talked about when God says no. Then the week before that, we talked about the dry bones, the valley of dry bones. It's in the bones. Everything that God has for you is in the bones of that valley. But today we're going to go up to the hill. We're going to go up to one of the hills. And in the Bible, there are many valleys and many hills. And I just thought I'd dive into some of them, pull some knowledge or wisdom that maybe God was giving me out of some of these valleys and hills. And we would just lean into what God's trying to say to us through this. And so here we go. We're going to go to the hill or the mountain called Mount Nebo. Mount Nebo. We're going to talk about Mount Nebo, and this was a place that God took one of the greats. His name was Moses. If you have heard of Moses, what a great leader, what a great entrepreneur, what a great pioneer, what a great man of faith to follow. But Moses ended up dying on Mount Nebo, and so we're gonna step into this. But I've kind of titled Nebo a certain way. So if you're taking notes, if you're right there in your computer, your phone, or whatever, if you're taking notes, jot this down. Nebo is spelled Nebo, Mount Nebo, and I've just kind of put this as an acronym, and it's gonna be just like this: the never-ending battle over ourselves. The never-ending battle over ourselves. And so this is the hill that Moses actually dies on. This is the hill where he can see the promised land, but he never actually walks in it. This is one of the favorite messages that God gave me. I shared this at our conference with a few pastors, and I want to share it with you now. So the never-ending battle over ourselves. This is a hill. This is a mountain that God takes us on, and many die on this mountain. Many see their promise from afar off and never actually get to walk in it. And I want to encourage you today, as you're watching this, hello from the road in Denver. Oh, hey, from the road. Come on, that must be a church in Denver. What's up? As you're watching this today and you're taking this in, the never-ending battle over ourselves, because as leaders, the Bible is clear in Ephesians. It says, now him who is able to do immeasurably, so it's unmeasurable, more than we could ever think or ask or imagine. More than we could ever think or imagine, to him who is able to do more than we can ever think of or imagine. Then it begins to go, then God uses the power that's working within us. So God is only able to do it, meaning he doesn't always, the destiny he has for you is not always fulfilled. He's able to do more than you can think or imagine, but it's based on the power that is working within you. So in other words, the power that's working within you is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit to transform you, to change you, to make me a better man of God, to make me look more like Jesus. And so God's call and destiny are hinged upon your allowance of him to work in your life. And so here's Moses. He dies on this hill. This is where God takes him to die. He wasn't meant to die on Mount Nebo, outside of the promised land, in the wasteland, in the desert. He was meant to die in the promised land with the fulfillment of God's promise for him. And so for me, I want to look into this, because what a mighty man of God. And if this mighty man of God could see the promised land but never get to experience it, that could happen for all of us. And I want to make sure that we as people capture some of the truths that are in this, so that no one's going to be on that mountain with you. We don't get to the never-ending battle over ourselves and not allow him to work within us to the level that we are able to step into the promised land. And so God is able meaning he can do it, but doesn't mean he does just because he can. He wants to work with the power that's within us. And I think for most of our life, we blame everybody else for where we're not at. But God is going, man, I want you to look in. The reason why you're not in your promised land is because I'm still working on you. The reason why your church is this size, or your dream is not brought to fruition yet, it's not anybody else. It's not that. You need this element. You need that. It's the path, the path that God has you on. It doesn't mean you need to beat yourself up on that path. It means you need to focus in instead of focusing out on that path. Fearless can grow in potential and power in what God has called us to do when Jeremy grows. As Jeremy grows and allows that power that's working within him, the Holy Spirit, to transform him, then God goes, okay, you can move further into your destiny. And so here's Moses. He never gets to his destiny. He never gets to it. He sees it, but he never walks in it. Deuteronomy, I better get into this. Deuteronomy 32:48 reads this. I'm reading from the NIV version. On the same day that the Lord told Moses, go up into the Abram Ridge to the Mount Nebo in Moab. So here's Nebo, never-ending battle over ourselves, across from Jericho. So here it is. This mountain is across from Jericho, and Jericho is what? In the promised land. And view Canaan. So that's the promised land, the land I am giving to the Israelites as their own possession. So God speaks to Moses, Deuteronomy 32, and says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go up into this mountain called Mount Nebo. It's across from Jericho. And from that mountain, you got views, and you can view the whole promised land. And I'm giving this promised land to the Israelites as their very own possession. So Moses knows this, and this has been a common thing for Moses throughout the whole time. And he says in verse 50, there on the mountain that you have climbed, you will die. So this is probably an awkward moment for Moses with God, because God, he's thinking, okay, we're going to go up to this mountain, and it's going to be awesome. I'm gonna see the promised land. I'm going to see what you've called us to, and it's just going to be beautiful. I'm going to go up there with views. And then God tells him, on Mount Nebo, on the never-ending battle over yourself, you're going to die, and you will be gathered to your people. So you're not going to be resurrected. You're going to die there, and you're going to heaven. You're going home. You're going to go be with mom and dad and all the people that have gone before you. You're going to be gathered to people, just as your brother Aaron. So at this point, Aaron died on Mount Hor. So Aaron's already dead. Associate pastor Aaron is gone and was gathered to his people. This is because, here's why you're going to die on the never-ending battle of yourself. This is because both of you broke faith with me in the presence of the Israelites at the waters of Meribeth Kadesh in the desert of Zin. And because you did not uphold my holiness among the Israelites. And so here's this moment. You're going to go to the mountain. You're going to see the promised land, but you're going to die on not ever experiencing the fruit. You're not going to live in the presence of your promise. You're going to die on the Mount Nebo, the never-ending battle of yourself. And here's why, Moses, because at the waters of Meribeth, you broke faith with me. You didn't step out in faith in what I was asking you to do. You said no at a place I was calling for a yes. You said no. You said, I'll go this far and no further at the waters of Meribeth, the place in the desert of Zin. And you lack to uphold my holiness among the Israelites. Therefore, you will see the land, the promise, only from a distance. And you will not enter the land I'm giving to the people of Israel. And so here's this moment. Wow, this is a teaching right here. There's a moment right here. Here's a moment. God says, look, Moses, I'm taking you as a leader. I mean, Moses, what a great leader. Someone would say, man, that's a good, successful pastor leading 3 million people. Wow, the Instagram shots from the crowd must have been epic. Remember all the years, the 40 years he leads these complaining, grumbling people in the desert, bread from heaven, water from rocks, a fire by night and a cloud by day, the splitting of the Red Sea, all these things that happened with Moses' life all culminated. And God says, look, I know you've done all this and we've tasted all this, but you're not actually going to get to taste the promised land. All this hard work, you're never going to cross path into what I promised for my people, because and you're going to die with the view of it, but never tasting it. You're going to die on Mount Nebo, the never-ending battle over yourself, Moses, because you weren't willing to trust me in faith, to believe that I knew more than you, that I had planned better than you. You weren't willing to trust me when it didn't make sense, when you couldn't explain it. You weren't willing to trust me, and because of that, you lowered my holiness among the Israelites. And because of that, I'm going to show you the land from a distance, but you will not enter it. You're going to die here on this mountain. Now, here's the deal. I'm reading you this because this hit me really hard. I don't want to become Moses. I love Moses. I can't wait to meet you, Moses, one day in heaven, but I do not want to become a leader that leads my whole life in pursuit of a call that God has on me. And the people I'm leading get in, but I myself as a leader miss where I'm leading everyone to and end up dying on the never-ending battle of myself, and never fully, at some point I reject God saying move forward, and I don't have enough faith. I don't apply my faith to that moment, and I lower his holiness to people that are following me. I want to be a leader that lives in the promised land. So in order to understand this, we have to go back to the moment, the water, and we have to dive deeper, because what happened at the place Meribeth in the desert. I mean, this sounds like a cool movie, or the desert of Zin. What happened in Meribeth Kadesh, in the desert of Zin, where in the presence of the Israelites, the water, what was up with the water, and what did Moses do wrong, and what was this moment? And so here, let's go back to it. If you want to know, raise your hand. Come on, right there. I see you in the comments. I see someone raising their hand. Jordan, what's up, Jordan? Numbers chapter 20 is the story of this moment. And so we can go back and look at this story in the first month. Numbers chapter 20, verse number 1, it says this: in the first month, the whole Israelite community arrived at the desert of Zin. So there we are. And they stayed at Kadesh. There, Miriam died and was buried. So look, we have all those names in there. So this is the spot. This is the moment where something that happened here years earlier in the book of Numbers, something that is written about here, is what kept Moses out of the promise that God has for him. So let's look at this. Let's dive into this. In the first month, the whole Israelite community. So here they are. And I believe in this moment, Aaron is even still alive in this moment. So verse number 1 tells us where they're at, shows us that. Verse number 2, let's get into this. Now there was no water for the community and the people gathered in opposition to Moses. So there was no water. There was no whatever your water is, right, in your church community. There was no community. Whatever you feel like you're missing and you're being starved of, that was missing from the community. And the people gathered to complain once again to the leader. And obviously the leader is the one that will receive those complaints. And so there's no water, or let's say it this way: there's no community in our community, or there's no discipleship in our community, or there's no strong words in our community, or there's no social justice in whatever it is. that you feel like you're lacking from your community. Here's the people of God grumbling once again, and it's Moses' problem to fix everything wrong in the community. So here, there was no water in the community, and this is a pretty important thing in the desert, that there would be water. It's hot, it's dry, and the people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. They quarreled with Moses, and they said, "If only we had died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord." So here's people. People are just dramatic. If you're a leader, just get ready. People are dramatic. Like what, right? You know, we've seen so many miracles. We've seen God move so many times. We've seen God do so many things. Yet here's the people again complaining one more time, and they go straight to like, we wish we were dead. If only we could have died. And so they started quarreling, and this is how they start their argument out. You know, so look, if you're a person in a church, stop being so dramatic. Just or if you're a leader, get ready. This is just life. This is, Moses had 3 million dramatic people. More is always more. It's never less. So all those people dreaming for, the crowds that you might see other leaders have or whatever, man, you don't want the crowds. You just want it. You want what God gives you when he gives it to you. If we'd only died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord. It's funny when people get offended, so these people are fully offended. Water everywhere all the time. There should never be out of water. And then this happened. Really, why was the water not there? I mean, if God wanted water there would have been water there, right? But God purposely allowed there not to be water there. He purposely said, okay, no community here just for a second. No discipleship here just for a second. No, we're not going to have a good teaching here. He purposely allowed whatever their community was longing for, it to be missing. And he did that so that they would lean upon him again. He was doing that to test Moses, to test the people, to grow them, to challenge them. But so the people, they believe for this, they receive this. And so to that degree, they're offended. They're offended at God. They're offended at Moses. They're offended at Aaron. They're offended at the journey. They're offended. They're angry because they didn't get what they thought they should get. Number one, as people, we need to understand that what we really deserve is hell. What we, as people, the Bible says the wages of sin are death. I don't know about you. I've put a lot of time into earning wages in sin. So what I really deserve is hell. So we can't forget that when we're expecting God to do all this. So anything above hell is a blessing. When God goes, no, you're not going to hell, you're going to heaven. Then starting there, we are blessed and highly favored. But as people of God, we start putting all these things that God has to do and we want him to do and we need him to do and we have to have. And especially in America, we are very dramatic Christians. And so we got all these things that the church has to be, our pastors have to be, our leaders have to be. And so we have a lot of room. And the Bible says in the last days, many people will be offended. And so we get offended. And so to that level and degree of what it didn't happen, we're offended. The people of God believed they should have water and there was no water. So that to that degree, they are offended. Now, offense brings spiritual pride. So it always does. Offense brings spiritual pride, because what it ultimately is saying is, God, I know you're God, but I know better than you. You did this wrong. It should have been up here and you gave me here. And so what happens? We get a spiritual pride. It's really what led to the fall of the devil out of heaven. It was a spiritual pride. It was I know better. I'm the leader here. And so that spiritual pride continues, and that spiritual pride rose up against Moses and Aaron and said, who are you? What did you do? Bring us out here to die? It would have been better for us to die. How foolish does spiritual pride sound? But when you are living in spiritual pride, you cannot see it. You can know you're living in spiritual pride and really probably ultimately living in offense if the people that used to lead you, you now feel like you know better than. The people that used to lead you, you now feel like you know better than. Or say it with this way with God. You used to be led by God, but now you feel like God messed up. He made a mistake. If you feel like God made a mistake, you are living in spiritual pride. God doesn't make mistakes. Okay, so we know this. This is knowledge. God does not make mistakes. He does not make acts. So if you're like, man, God, you made a mistake with this, that's spiritual pride. There's an offense there. There's almost, if you can look at it later, you would look at this and go, man, this sounds so stupid. This sounds so idiotic. Listen. Forgiveness and faith bring humility. And so here's the people of God. How could they get so crazy? Well, there was an offense and there was spiritual pride. So they said, if we'd only died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord. And then verse number 4, why did you bring the Lord's community into the desert that we and our livestock should die here? So they're saying we should have died. And why did you bring us here to die? So they're just speaking out of both sides of their mouth. Idiotic stuff. And obviously they knew Moses didn't bring them to the desert to die. They had to cross the desert to get to the promised land. Moses was trying to take them to the promised land. The goal was never that you would die in the desert. And anyways, Moses could go, this is not my fault. I wanted to go into the promised land 40 stinking years ago. But 10 of your folks said that the giants are too big. You didn't listen. You were rebellious. But Moses is attacked again. Here's the community. They're attacking Moses again. Why did you bring us into this desert to die? Look, they're just half-truths all over the place. Gossip. Look, you don't start talking like this to your leaders unless you've been talking like this to your friends, right? People they've been gossiping all along. Oh, Moses, he brought us in this desert to die. They're continuing the bad patterns and the bad habits of those who didn't make it to the promised land. If you want to make it to the promised land, you need to get a change of spirit. You have to say, God gives me eyes of faith. Lord, I want to encourage my leaders. Look, if you're a leader leading people, then you have leaders above you. And so don't become the Israelites. Don't get offended. When this happens here and you thought it was going to happen here, forgive, let go. Say, you know what? Thank God I have great leaders. Praise God for what you do have. For none of us deserve any of this. But here's the people of God. Okay, this is not even my sermon, but this is good stuff. Why did you bring us out of Egypt to this terrible place? So look how fast do people forget what Egypt was like. Why did you bring us out of Egypt? In Egypt, folks, in Egypt, you were slaves. In Egypt, you had an Egyptian standing over you. You were making bricks and bread and stuff for the Egyptians. You were being beaten. They were killing your firstborn. You were dying in Egypt. In Egypt, you could not worship the way you wanted to worship. In Egypt, you were slaves. They are in freedom, but they are having to trust God in the wild, in the wilderness. And in their voice, in their comments here is a lot. They're saying, why did you bring us out of Egypt, which was so good, to this terrible place of freedom? This tells me something, that freedom can be such a challenge at times that some of us would long to go back to the bondage of slavery because it is difficult to lead ourselves. There, someone else told me what to do. There, someone else told me what I couldn't, and I just succumbed to it. But here, in freedom, in the pain of what's in front of me, I have to lead myself. Why did you bring us to this terrible place of having to steward our lives? I would have much rather been a slave to sin, a slave to my past, a slave. Why did you bring me here of having to steward my mouth, of having to steward? So here's the people of God. They're complaining. They easy. It's funny how when people get offended and this is not even what my message is about. My message is about Moses. When people get offended, they quickly forget anything good that has happened. All they can think of is that giant thing in front of them. This is immaturity at its finest. This is my kids, right? Anything that goes wrong, they throw up their hands. You don't love me. You don't care about me. What are you talking about, Brave? We just bought you ice cream. I just got you. We just went to the Dollar Tree and spent $5. You love Lyric more than me. Why are you saying this? Because you opened her door and didn't open my. I didn't even know you were getting in the car. I was letting you open your own door. You don't love. Look, all of a sudden, Brave forgot about all. I have to sit there and remind. But the thing in front of you overrides the hundreds of thousands of things that you've done. When someone is offended, all they can see is that offense. All they can see is that hurt, and it makes them immature. It sounds immature. It looks immature. And guess what? It is. It holds that person in that place of offense until they forgive and they let go. And forgiveness is not predicated on someone saying sorry. It's predicated on you releasing someone from the debt you feel like they owe you. And so it makes you immature. So here is this group of people. They are offended. They are in the desert. They are blaming others. They are immature. And so we're at this place. So here's Moses. Why did you bring us, verse 5, why did you bring us out of Egypt to this terrible place? It has no grain or figs or grapes or pomegranate. They just start going off. There's just nothing here. It's funny how when you get irritated or you get offended or you get strong, it's just like now everything's negative. There's no this, there's no that. Well, there was bread from heaven, and there was water out of rocks, and there was a cloud by day and a fire by night, and there was the presence of God, and there was no chains and shackles. It's funny how when you're offended, all you can see is what there isn't, and you just keep piling and piling and piling and piling, and you can't remember anything good. Some people have been offended in my lifetime. Wow, big surprise in the ministry that we're leading people to the promised land. And it's so funny how when someone gets offended, all they can remember is one thing that just went weird, or they thought you meant this or whatever, but forget the hundreds of sermons, forget the hundreds of times they said, man, it changed my life. They forget the time you brought them food when no one had food for them. They forget the time where you gave them the position they weren't ready for. They forget the 3 hours of prayer that you spent with them and cried out to God. And so here's Moses. And let me tell you the side from a leader, because maybe you're just a person in leadership under a leader, but let me tell you the side from a leader, because here's Moses. And what ends up happening is Moses ends up getting offended with the people and almost offended with God. And because of that in his life, this is what leads him to dying on the Mount Nebo. So let me just tell you, leaders, if you're watching, people are going to get offended. They're just going to be weird. They're going to do it. The greatest leaders you have, the people who love you, who just you are the greatest thing they've ever been a part. You're the coolest, you're the best leader they've ever followed. They are going to turn. They are going to hate you at some moment. If you got one that never does, man, that is a special person. That is a person that is fully committed to the power and the presence of God working in their life. That is a person that has had the opportunity for offense, and they've chose forgiveness. They've chose grace. They've chose kindness. For the most part, you're going to have a lot of people that walk in, and especially because we live in the last days. Here we are in the last days. This is going to happen. We are spoiled in our thinking, in our mentality of what God's going to do, and then he allows us to go here. And it's a test. It's a test so we can go beyond. But here's Moses. So they're just going off on Moses. In verse 6, Moses and Aaron went up from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell face down, and the glory of the Lord appeared to him. This is what I encourage you to do as leaders. If you're going through something like this, just get in God's presence. And the Lord said to Moses, take the staff, and you and your brothers and Aaron, and gather the assembly together. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. Look at this. Notice this. Here's what I'm going to tell you to do, Moses. Moses does the right thing. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get frustrated. He gets in the presence of God. I'm encouraging, if you're walking through this as a leader, people talking about you, they're offended by you, whatever it is, get in the presence of God. When they get in the presence of God, God tells them what to do. Here's what you do, Moses. Take the staff, you and your brother Aaron, and get to the assembly together and speak to the rock before your eyes. It will pour out its water. Again, we're talking about the moment that God says, because of what you did in this moment, how you handled this situation, you're just going to see the promised land. You're not going to walk in it. He takes him to Mount Nebo. He dies on Mount Nebo, which we've said to us, we're saying the acronym, it means never-ending battle over ourselves. And so Moses dies seeing the promised land after all the victory he has because of his failure in this moment to treat God's word as holy. And so we're looking at that. We're diving into that. The people are offended. It's not Moses' fault. It happened. He has every right to be frustrated, but he doesn't take it out on the people. He gets in God's presence, and God begins to speak to him. He says, take your staff, and you and your brother Aaron gather the assembly together. Speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour forth its water. And you will bring water out of a rock for the community so they and their livestock can drink. So look, God's not even mad at the people. He's like, you know what? We're going to bless them anyways. We're going to love on them anyways. We're going to give them the one thing they think they couldn't have. There's going to be a miracle in that area. And so God tells Moses, speak to it, prophesy to it, say to it, water come out of this rock. Do the impossible, God. Bring life out of something dead. And you will bring water out of the rock, and they'll all drink of it. So Moses took his staff. So he did say, take your staff, take your brother. So Moses begins on this journey. Moses took his staff from the Lord's presence, just as he had commanded him. He and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock, and Moses said to them, listen. Listen, you rebels. There we go. Get it. Come on, Moses. Moses got some attitude. Moses got some attitude here. Listen, you rebels. Must we bring water out of this rock? Sounds like he's going off script a little bit here. It sounds like there's an offense in his heart in this moment, because look at Moses is starting to walk in spiritual pride. Because what does God say? God says, go before the people with your staff, and Aaron, don't even talk to the people. Don't say a word to the rebellious, idiotic group in front of you. Do not talk to the offended. Don't speak to them. Speak to the rock. Speak to the dead thing. Speak to the rock and call forth water. Here's what I want you to do. And Moses doesn't do that. Moses says, listen, you idiots. Listen, you rebels. Must we bring water out of this rock? Then Moses raised his arm and he struck the rock twice. Pow! Pow! He hits it twice. Moses is, can I say it? He's pissed off. Moses is ticked. He doesn't speak to the rock. He speaks to the people. He calls them rebellious. He calls them what they are. It is what it is. You idiots, you rebellious folks. God told me to do this. And you want some water? Have some water. Pow! Pow! He does the opposite of what God tells him to do. Why? Because Moses has allowed the offended to make him offended. He thought God was going to give him people up here, and God gave him people down here. And to that degree, Moses was angry. He was bitter. You want to know why pastors spend a lot of time in the green room? Probably because they're angry, they're bitter, they don't want to be around people anymore. You want to know why you can't get a hold, you don't have time with your pet, because pastors and leaders have been so hurt over and over and over again. Sometimes you just get this place where you're like, man, I don't want anything to do with people. I love people and hate people. I don't want to lead people. God, I just want to be your son. I just want to follow you. People are difficult to lead because people are always on this Mount Nebo, the never-ending battle over ourselves. And Moses is also a person, and he is on this battle himself, and he gets this spiritual pride. He does not step in faith, and he goes, I'm going to do it my way. He said, God, your way didn't work. I'm doing it my way. But ultimately, offense is rooted in fear. Because Moses, this is not the first time God asked him to use his mouth instead of his hands. Moses raises his hand, strikes the rock twice. Water gushed out in the community, and the livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I gave them. These were the waters of Meribah, where the Israelites quarreled with the Lord, and where he showed himself holy amongst them. Wow. So this moment happens. Moses is not surprised when Aaron dies on a Mount Hor, and God goes, okay, it's your turn now to die on Mount Nebo because of the waters of Meribah, because of the place back there that you did not trust me. You did not lean into me and honor what I was asking you to do over what you felt in front of you. You didn't speak to the rock. You hit the rock. Why was God so worried about Moses speaking instead of hitting? And why did Moses almost feel like that was such a slam to God? Such a, take that, God. Take that, people. Because all along, God was trying to use the one part of Moses that Moses was upset about. All along, God was trying to touch the one thing in Moses that went wrong, his mouth. All along, God was just trying to get Moses to open up the one area, his stutter, his backward speech, the one thing he felt like he wasn't good enough in, that God said, I'm going to use from the beginning. All along, God was trying to get Moses to speak, to prophesy. Look at this. Look at this. You know the other time, because Moses hit a rock before. Exodus 17:6. It says, I will stand there before the rock at Horeb and strike the rock. So God tells him to strike a rock before, and the people came and drank. So Moses did this in the sight of the elders. God asked him to strike a rock before. He asked him to use his staff over and over again. Use your staff, hold it out before the sea. Use your staff, strike the rock. But initially, in the very beginning, remember Exodus chapter 3, verse number 1 through 17. When God calls Moses over to the burning bush and Moses has failed. At this moment, Moses has walked away from his destiny in Egypt. He has taken life into his own hands. These people, these Israelites have rejected him because he didn't grow up in their house. He looked like them, but he didn't grow up in the same environment because he grew up in the king's palace. God had him there for a reason, and he tries to save them in this moment and ends up murdering one of the Egyptians, and the people of God tell on him. So he runs away and hides in the desert as a shepherd. And as a shepherd, he's quit on his destiny. He's given up on his purpose. God shows up to him in a burning bush, says, take off your sandals so Moses won't run away anymore. Moses gets in front of the burning bush and he says, I'm going to use you, Moses. You're going to go to Pharaoh. You're going to go and you're going to say, let my people go. And Moses says, God, I can't speak. I can't talk. I have stammering lips. And God says, who gave man his mouth? Don't you trust me with your mouth? Don't you trust? What Moses is referring to is the last time my mouth got me in trouble. The last time I tried to speak, I failed. The last time I tried to step up for my people, I let you down, God. I took it into my own hands. And here's God giving Moses a second chance. And Moses says, look, God, I'll go. He says, look, here's your staff, throw it down. It turns into a snake. So Moses starts finding identity in his staff. And then he says, look, I need to bring someone along with me. Can I bring my brother-in-law, Aaron? And God says, Moses says, he's a good speaker. He can talk good. You can use him in power in this way. And so God doesn't want it, but God allows it. God allows this partial obedience because we are on a journey with God. God is patient with us. He's kind with us. And so all along, this Aaron is traveling with him, speaking for him. What does Aaron do? Over and over again, Aaron does the wrong thing. Aaron's the one who made the golden calf when Moses was getting the 10 commandments from God. Aaron's the one who has them melt their jewelry down and creates the worshiping idols. Aaron's the one who they are profanely dancing in the wrong way and saying they're worshiping God, but they're not. They're acting out in orgies and all these. Aaron is the problem. Aaron is the one. But Aaron is who Moses chose to bring with him because Moses was afraid to use his mouth. And here is God. God says, okay, use your staff. Use your staff. Allow Aaron to do it. Use your staff. And God goes, okay, we're getting closer to the promised land. I want you to use your voice. I want you to use your voice. And God asked Moses to use his voice in a moment where Moses himself is offended. He asked him to step out in trust when Moses is so just beaten down, tired. These people are overwhelming me. And God goes, hey, remember one thing. I'm only working on you. I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about you, the leader, because there is still something in your life that I've had patience with. I've allowed you to do it your way. I've allowed you to partner with me somewhat. I've allowed you to have partial obedience, but now I'm asking for full obedience. I want you to use your mouth. And guess what? Moses uses his mouth. The enemy wants to use your mouth. Moses uses his mouth to beat up the people, to tell the people exactly where they're at. And God says, no, I wanted you to use your mouth to speak to the dead thing. But Moses chooses not to trust God again with his mouth. Such a little thing, but it ends him up. What is your mouth? What is the symbol of, for Moses, what was using his mouth? What does that symbolize in your life? What thing is God asking you, will you give me this? Will you trust me with this? Will you hand me this? And you think he's forgot because he hasn't said anything in a while. See, God's not going to take you into your promise until you fully trust him with everything. Moses doesn't speak to the rock. Why? Because he's fearful that if he speaks, it won't come out right. If he speaks, it will come out wrong. It will not work out. See, there's three types of security. There is insecurity. There is false security. And there is God's security. There is insecurity. There is false security. And there is God security. Insecurity will, if it doesn't lead to God's security, will ultimately lead into false security. Moses' insecurity led to false security in Aaron. Aaron can speak for me. But then God goes, no, it's your turn, Moses. Leads to false security, which ultimately kept Moses out of the promised land. Insecurity is because of fear. False security will lead to pride. And God's security will lead to transparency. If your security is in anything other than God, it's false security. God is looking for God's security in your life. Remember David? He had God's security. He was rejected by man and accepted by God. Solomon, the king that didn't make it, had false security because of insecurity. He was accepted by man, but rejected by God. Moses, in this moment, has dealt so long with insecurity that now his false security, what people think of me, it's being shattered because now they hate him. And then Aaron is gone. So what do I do, God? Aaron's gone. The people hate me. And God's calling me to put all my trust in him. Moses makes the wrong decision and he ends up dying seeing what God has for him, but never walking in it. Did God do that because he was mean? I mean, how mean? I mean, God, just help him out. Give him some grace. Give him some. Well, actually, God doing that actually was grace. Because the very next battle that God was showing him was Jericho. How were they going to fight in Jericho? Was it going to be hitting with the staff? No. It was going to be shouting with their voice. God was actually protecting Moses from the greatest failure of his life in front of people because he could never get to the place where he trusted God with his voice. If he couldn't speak to a rock, he would have never spoke to a wall. So where's the hope? Moses dies on Mount Nebo. Well, the hope is found in Joshua. Joshua is a symbol for Jesus, the hope for the people of God. Even when we have leaders that live in insecurity and false security, the hope for us to move forward into the promised land, the hope in the story is in Joshua, which is Jesus. It's Jesus who leads them with grace into the promised land and teaches them how to use their voice, how to trust God in front of the walls. It's Joshua who God sends into the story. It's Joshua who has a different spirit. And I'm calling forth some mighty men and women of God who are watching this right now, who choose today, I am not dying on Mount Nebo. I am not giving in the wrong way to the battle over myself. I am getting under God's presence and I'm saying, God, whatever it is that you've called of me, whatever thing I'm holding on to, that I get say, God, you can go in any room in my house, but that room, God, I open up that door to you. And I say, God, if it's time, come in. God, I want full obedience because I want to lead into the promise of God. God was not being mean to Moses. He was protecting Moses. Moses, if you're not ready to speak to a rock, you will never speak to a wall. Thank God for the places that I've missed and I can't speak to and I can't get through. Jesus is the one who leads us fearlessly into the promised land and takes down the walls of Jericho, teaches us how to worship, teaches us how to prophesy, teaches us how to walk in grace. I choose to not die on this mountain over me, myself, and I. I choose to step into my destiny. I choose to not get offended by the offended. I choose not to get offended when I would think God should do it here and he does it here. I'm not going to have security in this. I'm not going to have hope in this. I'm going to have hope in him. And if I have hope in him, even if I'm down here, he's with me in the fire. He's with me in the desert. He's with me in the dryness. He's with me when they all turn against me. He's with me when they speak bad about me. He's with me. In fact, he went through it himself. And if I could trust that he turned his eyes to God, I can turn my eyes to God. Come on. Down spiritual pride, down, I know how it is. God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to do what you asked me to do, even if it sounds crazy. I'm going to forgive when it's hard to forgive. I'm going to open my mouth when I stutter. Can you imagine if Moses would have had God's security, he would have had the ability to go before the people and say this, hey, people of God, I know you're upset. I know you're offended. I know that it's hard, but let me tell you, I'm offended too. I'm hurt too, because God keeps asking me to use my mouth. He keeps asking me to use my mouth, but my mouth is down here, and he's called me to do it up here. I guarantee if Moses would have had God's security, it would have led to transparency. And in that place of transparency, he would have told the people who are mad and angry and grumbling and offended, he would have told them, look, I'm hurting too. And let me tell you, I'm afraid to speak. God's asked me to speak to the rock and we would have water. But I'm just telling you, I'm just being honest with you. I've always been afraid to use my mouth because I stutter. I can't get it out right. When I say it comes out wrong. That's why I have Aaron here. And that's why I've been using this shepherd staff. I'm not a leading sheep anymore. I don't even need this. But God's allowed. If he would have just got up and he would have stuttered it out, he would have said it, people would have ran to him. They would have loved on him. They would have said, you're one of us. Wow, we're all in this together. If he would have been vulnerable as a leader, if he would have opened up, they would have started crying together, and they would have looked at the rock and they would say, Moses, speak to the rock. If it takes you all day, if it takes you all year, we're going to cheer with each stutter. The stutter would have been the new cool thing. If Moses would have just said, I'm broken too, I'm trying to. And he couldn't have done that unless he had God's security. Insecurity will create fear. False security will create pride. But God's security will create transparency in you. And transparency will allow people to lay down their offense and say, wow, you're just like us. Therefore, I can follow you. What makes us follow Jesus is that he went through what we went through. If you're a leader out there, don't try to be perfect. We're a mess. I'm a hot mess all the time. But I do know that God has called me. And I do know that people that are there that are also a hot mess will respond to transparency. If he would have just said, I'm so afraid to hit the rock. I'm so afraid to speak to the rock. I know they would have said, come on, Moses, let's go. Talk to it, man. We're with you. We're behind you. And Moses would have been the one to knock down the walls. But instead, he died on Mount Nebo, seeing it, but never experiencing it. Because he kept putting his hope in Aaron and the people. That was where he found his security. Because of fear, it led to pride. And pride comes before the fall. God bless you. Thanks for joining today. I love you all. I'm so glad you came in. Hang out. If you like this message, if you think someone needs to hear it, share it, like it, comment, hit the little bell in the bottom. So every time we go live, every time we do something, you'll know it hit. Follow this YouTube. Let people know about it. God bless you.